Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of FinServ Tech Oracles. I'm Johna Johnson, and I am here with my oracular colleague, John Burke, to share our thoughts on technology for financial services firms. For this episode, John, you wanted to talk about cloud, the technologies that financial services firms love to hate. As we've seen, financial services firms, like other companies, have enthusiastically embraced cloud, but there's a really interesting operating gap. Although basically 100% of financial services firms are using some form of cloud, about 30% of organizations still don't have good cloud metrics, KPIs, defined procurement requirements, or a budget or strategy, at least one of, or maybe many of the above. So in this episode, we'll talk about some of the most common mistakes that FinServ companies make when adopting cloud. John, what's mistake number one?
Oh, well, mistake number one is got to be going in without a plan. And there are many facets to that, but going in without a plan pretty much guarantees not only that you'll spend more than you want to spend, but that you will increase risk, and in multiple categories. You'll increase the risk of systems going down and having a hard time bringing them back up as quickly as you used to. And you'll increase the risk of catastrophic failures without a backup. And you'll increase your security risks, because going in without a plan, you're also not sufficiently planning for how you're going to secure the systems in cloud. And as we've seen as recently as a few weeks ago, major organizations can be a couple of mouse clicks away from exposing to the public data that is supposed to remain private. So going in without a plan, and very specifically what we call the workload placement policy, is a huge problem. People need to have a policy, and the policy needs to tell them which workloads should go first and which workloads should go later, and what characteristics they need to put in place around those workloads in order to maintain their levels of mitigated risk, maintain their cost points where they need them to be, and so on.
So your first mistake is going in without a plan. The consequences of that are you increase risk in multiple dimensions, and the mitigation for that mistake is really have that workload placement policy. Did I sum that up correctly?
Yep. Problem, not having a plan. Solution, have a plan.
Yeah, that's the way to say it very simply. What would you say mistake number two is?
Well, like the magical thinking of going in without a plan, going in expecting to save money, to reduce your costs, is this persistent fantasy across the board, not just in financial services companies. And typically, it's not coming from the IT practitioners who are actually having to move stuff out to the cloud and maintain it there. It's coming from the board level or some level in between the board and IT. And the expectation is that cloud will save us money. Cloud will save us money. We'll save money with cloud. But that is not something that folks should count on without a plan, and not something that anybody in the IT department should ever indicate is likely or a guarantee, because especially if you're going in without a plan, you're going to be moving workloads out into the cloud that were not designed to take advantage of the virtues of cloud. And so they're not going to be using, dynamic bursting of capacity to handle workloads when they rise up. They're instead going to be running virtual CPUs and consuming virtual memory continuously, waiting for something to do. And of course, that's a great way to spend money that you don't have to spend. All sorts of other possibilities there for wasting money by moving into the cloud without a plan. And therefore, what we have seen is typically folks are spending anywhere from 13 to 30% more in shoving stuff out into the cloud willy-nilly, basically, or as fast as they can, as most of them seem to these days.
So just to reiterate, in the research that we've done, and I know you did this personally, we saw about 13 to 30% more by putting things in the cloud without a plan, without a WPP that's well thought out and takes into consideration all the factors you mentioned.
That's right. And the folks who did really good jobs planning sometimes spent 25, 30% less. But a lot of work went into getting to the point where there was some money to be saved.
Right. And I think the great takeaway is don't expect to save money. You might, but that's just a happy, that's icing on the cake, so to speak. And the cake really is, if you do it correctly, agility and bursting capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a third mistake you want to highlight?
Well, it's kind of hand in hand with the other two, and another piece of magical thinking that somehow there's not a whole new layer or set of whole new layers of risk coming into your organization when you deal with a third party for all of your fundamental computing capacity. A failure to understand or mitigate third party risk, I guess, is how I would sum that one up.
And I think that's a huge deal, particularly with tightened SEC requirements,
Right.
Tightened government regulations across the board. I mean, I keep thinking of our poor client that we were talking to just the other day, and their HR department had gone out to the cloud without talking to the security team, got breached. A lot of sensitive HR data made it out to the cloud. And guess who got blamed? The people who had no say in that decision, because it was made before they had a chance to do anything. So I think the third party risk of cloud services is something that financial services firms and lots of others are really not thinking enough about.
Hopefully the SEC rules requiring reporting on material breaches at third parties providing you services will sharpen the focus.
I don't know that it does, John, because what I've seen is it just puts CISOs in the crosshairs because, and this is a topic for another episode, but right now CISOs are the only operational executives who also carry a burden of personal jail time and personal risk. They're not necessarily on the board, they're not necessarily officers of the company, but they are mandated that they can go to jail. And I think that's incredibly unfair and unreasonable, because the idea that the rest of the senior executives can just say, well, that's an IT problem or a cybersecurity problem is nuts. And that is a topic for another discussion. But I do think the net is it puts a lot of pressure on CISOs. So if you're a CISO and you're watching this and you're thinking about cloud, remember the third-party risk issue here is bubbling up to the top. And with that, John, I think we are well and truly wrapped up. So cloud is, for financial services firms, still the technology you love to hate. Tune in next week at 0900 for the next episode of Financial Services Tech Oracles, right before the markets open on Tuesdays. And thank you.